The Holy Gospel according to St. Luke, the 10th chapter. Glory to you, O Lord. Now as Jesus and his disciples went on their way, he entered a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. She had a sister named Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to what he was saying. But Martha was distracted by her many tasks. So she came to him and asked, Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her then to help me. But the Lord answered her, Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted by so many things. There is need of only one thing. Mary has chosen the better part, which will not be taken away from her. The gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. Please be seated, friends. Well, good morning, and a lot of fun to be here today. And for those musicians, I just need to remember when to put the capo on, all right? I don't know if you noticed that time I get started on a song and it's like, oh yeah, this is a capo on the third. That's gonna not be good if I don't do that. Anyway, hey, where were you, if you're of a certain age, on July 20th, 1969. You know, if you remember 1969, some of you say, I'm not a clue, I wasn't born yet, but if you do, you know exactly where you were, because that was the day that Neil Armstrong stepped down the ladder on Apollo 11 and out into the moon, the first step. And of course, those famous words, that's one small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind. You know, before they left, he has a brother, he's a Buckeye, right? Right here, Neil Armstrong. Before they left, his brother Dean asked him, what are you most anxious about? What's your greatest fear? You know, they're going, 200,000+ miles away in a kind of like a Volkswagen with extra metal, all right, with an engine attached to the back. They're going there. What's your greatest fear? And he said, how deep is the dust? You know, I remember reading, I used to be interested in such things as a kid, reading a book where the scientists back in the day weren't certain how deep the dust was on the moon, because the figuring was that millions and millions of years of dust would land on low gravity, and it could be like quicksand. So you would just sink. And so when the Eagle landed and it didn't sink, this was a good day. Now, so that's kind of the background for this. Of course, I want to talk a little bit about that because it's such a famous thing and you can't help but mention it. But I really want to go 6 months before that to Christmas Eve 1968. I remember, that's how old I am, all right? I remember this. And when the three astronauts, Frank Borman, Jim Lovell, and Bill Anders, they circled the moon. You know, they wanted to check out where a safe landing spot was, the Sea of Tranquility. And as they circled, they read Genesis chapter 1, verses 1 through 10. Like more people, 500+ million people were listening in and all this as they read these verses. And then after the fourth time around, something really happened unusual, and they were able to capture a photo. It's an iconic photo of the first time a human being had ever seen an earth rise. All right, the earth rising over the lunar horizon. And it was a stunningly beautiful thing. And they reported how they felt. Frank Borman, the commander, said, I happened to glance out one of the still clear windows just at the moment the earth appeared over the lunar horizon. It was the most beautiful, heart-catching sight of my life, one that sent a torrent of nostalgia, of sheer homesickness surging through me. It was the only thing in space that had any color to it. And Jim Lovell echoed that when he said, up there it's black and white. There's no color in the whole universe. Wherever we looked, the only bit of color was back on Earth. It was the most beautiful thing there was to see in all the heavens. Now, you have to remember, they had been instructed to focus on the moon. That was their mission. They had a limited amount of time to make certain that Apollo 11 would have a safe place to land. But when they saw that, all the planning went out the window, and the voice recorder captured this near hysteria, like giddy schoolboys fumbling for film for the color camera. And so Borman says, "Oh my God, look at this picture over there. It's the Earth coming up. Wow." And Bill Anders says, "Hey, don't take it. It's not scheduled." Can you imagine that? Don't, these are disciplined military people. Don't take that picture. We got things to do. And Borman laughs. You got color film, and so they kind of tussle with getting the film and the camera. "Hurry, quick, take several of them," says Lovell. "Calm down," says the commander. They're so very excited because the beauty of the Earth in that darkness and that black and white world just caused them to do what was unexpected. Or rather, I should say, it caused them to do what we should expect. When you see something that beautiful and that mysterious, this big blue ball floating in space, and the first time human eyes had ever seen that happening, if you weren't excited, if you weren't entranced, if you weren't awestruck, if you weren't astounded, there would be something wrong with your capacity for wonder, something wrong with your capacity to see beauty. And so to segue from the moon to Mary and Martha just a little bit, Jesus comes to dinner, and Martha, and this is not a dig on Martha, she's got things to do. I mean, she realizes she's got a schedule. She really wants it to be nice and shows she's a busy woman, as all of us are busy. But Mary, she is awestruck. She's looking at the wonder of Jesus Christ, who's in her dining room, all right? And she's sitting there, and in a first century world, that the master would say, "Come to a woman, come and hear me teach. Come and hear me. I want you to come too." And there she's sitting entranced by the master, by the Lord, and Martha's kind of too busy. And what Mary gets is that there is only a little bit of time here. This, like that earthrise, it isn't going to last forever. And so she says, we got to take time to hear. We got to take time to see. We got to take time to enjoy the presence of Jesus Christ. Because in her dining room, to segue a little bit into our second lesson, was the image of the invisible God. Think about that. The God whom we long for, the God whom we seek, the God whom we trust and hope to God that God is there to help us in this black and white world, in this dull and gray world of sin and death and darkness and despair and dirt and disease that plagues us all. In this black and white world, there shone a light in the face of Jesus Christ, the image. And that word image is icon. And if you come from the Greek tradition, or the Byzantine or Orthodox, you'll know they'll have beautiful icons. And an icon is not just a picture. An icon is painted prayerfully, and it is a window into heaven. It is a window into the life of the saints. And so when Jesus Christ comes in the flesh, the firstborn of all creation, says Paul, in him and for him all things were created. Martha's, and again, I don't want to dig Martha, because I get it. I'm a busy guy, all right? I get it. But it's like those astronauts, if one of them would have said, "Hey, mission control, I got two yahoos looking out the window, Can you tell these guys to put the camera down and focus on what we got to do?" Instead, see, that would have been kind of weird. But Martha doesn't quite, she's so good. She wants it to go so well. She's so committed that she does good things, and she misses the best thing. And that's just it's not ragging on Martha. It's just that Mary chose in that brief moment of her life to sit, because without listening to Jesus, without contemplation, without meditation on his word, without stillness, without being awestruck by the profundity of the God revealed in Jesus Christ, we simply will live in a world that we don't know what to do. We'll simply live in a world that is gray and dark and dismal. I was writing this sermon, and I remembered a couple years ago, I read a book which was one of the best books I've read, a modern book in the last 4 or 5 years or more. It's written by a theologian who teaches in Calvin Seminary or Calvin College. His name is James K.A. Smith. And the title of the book, it's very accessible. I recommend it to you. The title is just wonderful. It's You Are What You Love. Think about that. You are what you love. And and that's so true. And in this book, he quotes this French guy, this French poet that I'd never heard of. Now, if you speak French, forgive me, all right? Because I do not speak French. I had a year of French once, but I know how to say je ne parle pas français, which means I don't speak French, all right? That's all I remember, all right? So, but this Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, something like that, okay? But he said this. And now apply this to this whole idea of ministry and work and capturing a vision, looking out the window to see the beauty of God. He said, if you want to build a ship, you can apply that in any way. Don't drum up people to collect wood and don't assign them tasks for work, but rather teach them to long for the endless immensity of the sea. Mary looked at Jesus Christ and she saw the endless immensity of the love and the grace and the goodness and the beauty of God, and she wouldn't be budged. I love her for it. Bring out a plate of cheese and crackers because we're going to hear this guy. It's just too important. It's just too beautiful. And if you think of those astronauts, what got them to want to go to the moon? It was not because they were, in class one day and said, I don't have anything better to do. I think it started when they were young boys and they looked up into the heavens and they saw the beauty of the stars and they said, someday that's where I want to go. Because when you look at Jesus Christ, when you really take time to hear, when we really take time to listen, when we really take time to know the difference that the beauty of this revelation is to us and to the world, and if we're not awestruck, if we're too busy, then there's something, beloved, there's something wrong. You see what I mean? There's something wrong. Okay, I'm going to wrap it up. I read this story of a young man from England who left the Christian faith. He left the Christian faith and he converted to Islam. He became a Muslim. And you know why he converted in this article? He said that he found the church of his upbringing, I quote, tepid and half-believing. And he didn't see the wonder of God. And I think, that's maybe the greatest sin that we as a church, and not just a congregation, but the church, when we don't help people to really see the goodness and the beauty of God himself in the face of Jesus Christ. In a response to his conversion, in letters to the editor in the next issue, all right, there was an Anglican clergyman who responded to this young man who had become a Muslim. And he wrote, "The glory of God is not that God remained cloaked in transcendence, far beyond human sin and suffering, but rather that in Christ God drew near, Christ giving himself for others, even to the point of taking on flesh and dying a gruesome death." And I would add, and rising from that gruesome death. Once you've captured that vision, once you've seen that possibility, and we're too busy to really look, examine, and really too busy to say, I've got to think more, I've got to listen more to the profundity and to the beauty of God revealed in Jesus Christ. I have it in my notes. We were in Israel 3 weeks ago, and we're at the Garden Tomb. And the Garden Tomb is a beautiful spot. There's a tomb that looks like a first century tomb. It's old. It's not probably the original site. That's probably at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. But it's a nice spot. And we had communion there under the trees. There's a little breeze blowing. And as we prepared for communion, off in the distance, we heard the Muslim call to prayer with a minaret. And so I stopped what I was doing. I said, why are we Christians? I mean, what's the real significance of being explicitly pointed a Christian? And it's Jesus Christ. It's Jesus Christ in his life, death, and resurrection. It's Jesus Christ in all the beauty revealed to us. And when we gaze at that beauty, when we gaze at that goodness, gaze at that brightness, gaze at that glory, and we're not interested? Something's wrong. because we have seen Jesus in the sheer loveliness of God. To be a Christian or disciple is to be awestruck by the beauty and wonder of God, that he did not remain in the heavens, gazing down in the distance at all the dirt and disease and death, but God's beauty descended, and so Mary sat before him, awestruck. She couldn't be budged. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.